Welcome to Blue Talks. So what I wanted to talk about today is a little exercise that I did years ago. So essentially the backstory is I was struggling in my life with anxiety for a number of years. I had hypochondria, if you guys have ever heard of that. Basically, it's like any disease I read or heard about, I developed the symptoms. And I was struggling with that. And it really feels like you have whatever it is, the illness, like you have all the symptoms. So it's like you have it. And I was struggling with that. And eventually, I discovered stand-up comedy, which sounds like a crazy way to cure anxiety. And I don't even know if I could use the word cure, but for me at least, to help put it in remission, if you want to call it that way, and hypochondria. And so I used to joke and say I was in the waiting rooms of doctors' offices so often that I had my own coffee mug for about 4 years. And if I go in and I'd say I have this, and they would test me, and then they'd say, no, you don't. And then I'd say, okay, then I must have this. Like I'd read something else, and it was just a constant cycle for 4 years. And then I get tricked into performing stand-up comedy one night. A lot of you know that story, but basically I get tricked into performing stand-up. And the next day when I went to the office, people said, did you meet somebody new, like a girl or something, because you seem like you have a new jump in your step. And then I was like, I'm on to something. And that's when I first started down the path of discovering a passion. And so what happened was the anxiety, hypochondria, very quickly, I won't even say slowly, but quickly disappeared. And I mean, that's a whole nother story, but that's why I always say I'm fueled by vitamin P. Like I always say, it's the vitamin P is the one vitamin you can't buy in the stores and the most important one you'll ever take. And obviously P is for passion or purpose. And so I had this battle and with anxiety, with hypochondria, and then all of a sudden I noticed, as I mentioned, it was disappearing. So I spent 3 or 4 years, anxiety gone, hypochondria gone, and so on. And so all was good in the world. And then all of a sudden, the anxiety started coming back. But because I hadn't had it in a while, after having it for so long, I noticed, like, it was like, what's this? What's going on? I got to get on top of this. And so what I went to is this quote I heard one time that says, the only difference between the you of today and the you of 5 years time will be the books that you read and the people that you meet. And I knew I was reading the right books at that point. I knew I was studying the right thought leaders. I knew I was feeding my mind the right things. So I said, if it is one of those two things, it's got to be the other one. Who am I surrounding myself with? And what's interesting is I had no idea. So meaning I had no idea if I was surrounding myself with 20 people and all were positive or all were negative, because I'd never done an inventory, we'll call it, of my friend list. Like, who am I spending the most time with and what are they bringing to my life? And I'll just call it positive input or negative input. Like, were they bringing toxic energy or were they bringing good energy? So I felt the only way I'm going to know is to actually like sit down and ask myself and maybe go through an exercise. So I kind of developed this exercise around figuring out who I was spending the most time with and what were they doing for my mindset. And so what I did, and I'm just randomly these aren't real names, but I'm just saying, like, let's say it was Cecilia, Sophia, I'm not going to name everybody in the room because some of these people were toxic. So Dawn, like I'm just putting names, right? Jimmy, Denise, I'll probably forget these names, so hopefully I don't have to remember these. Audrey, kind of an older school name, but that's my grandmother's name. So let's just say the number I came up with at the time was 18. So 18 people that were in my life, maybe once a week, twice a week, or often. And so then what I did was I had to sit with it and say, who is truly positive on this list and who is negative? Now, it wasn't the person positive or negative, it's just who is bringing positive into my life or negative. Negative for me at that time was like gossip, could be negative, or the neighbor I had when I'd walk out the door and it was like the middle of June. She's like, "Did you hear it's supposed to snowstorm this weekend? What are we all gonna do?" And and then blow that into something it wasn't. That was still negative energy to me. But then there were the ones that were really like talking smack about people, like all those things. Or just saying, like, if I was gonna do something that week, they say, "Oh, why are you trying that? That's a waste of your time." So I calculated all that stuff. And so I would say, okay, this person's bringing positive. They're bringing positive energy to my life. Negative, 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 positive, negative. But again, the numbers were a bit different. It was 18. I remember at the time it was 18 total. And so then what I did, I'll just do it here to keep it easy, is I made a second list. And again, I put this numbers, you wouldn't have to make the list. But literally what I did was I just went, okay, positive, positive. So 2 positive, was that 4 negative out of 6 people. In my case, it was 14 negative out of 18 people. And so I immediately realized there's no way that I'm going to be able to be positive every day if I'm starting out my day inputting or bringing in whatever that number is, 80% or 75% negativity every day from the people that are in my life. So this was a real eye-opener, and it really sucks when you do it sometimes because it could be somebody you really care about that's on this side. So for example, it could be a family member, like it could be a sister, a brother, and then you got to think, what do I do from there? If that's the negative person. I remember one time I did a talk for the ALS Society, and a guy came up after me, and he said, yeah, Corey, it was so funny because it was him and his business partner, and his business partner was like 9'3", exaggerating. He was like 3'2", exaggerating, but it looked like that. Actually, I put a picture up on my Facebook today, if you go look at it, me and the wrestler that I took a picture with, that I did an interview with, and you'll see it's similar type ratio. Like I'm like really tiny. I look like a hobbit. And so this scenario is this guy came up, he was short, the other guy was tall, and he goes, Corey was super nice. He said like he wouldn't kick his mother out of his life. He said, you know what? My mother was ruining my life, so I kicked her to the curb and I've never looked back. So, and I'm bringing this up jokingly, but to say he made that decision and that might have been the right decision for him. So I say this because one side is just doing the inventory and seeing who am I surrounding myself with, but what do you do with it? Like once you know that 80% of the people in your life are negative, where do you go from there? And so then it becomes the scenario of taking action. So if, as an example, I can't remember, Sophia. So we won't say Sophia. I guess I put you as a negative Sophia. Not intentional. But let's say it was Sophia. And let's say I said, okay, well, Sophia brings some negativity into my life. So then I can choose, do I remove Sophia? Do I reduce Sophia? You see where I'm going with that. So on the negative side, it's either, for me, it was either remove or reduce. Less time with or remove altogether. And I went through and I had to get really serious. And I really based it a lot on 2 things. Who's the most negative? Like meaning, are they really, really negative or just a little bit negative? And how important are they in my life? That was the 2 things. What I will say is, one of the things about how important are they in my life, if it was a client, but that was a very negative, toxic client, then that's a scenario where I go, do I fire a client? Meaning it wasn't just like, is it benefiting me money-wise? That wouldn't have mattered into it. I shared somebody, I won't say the name now because it's their story to share, but they did share it live on an interview. But they shared that they have a brand, and I shared with some of the people here yesterday, and somebody offered them $1 million to let them use their brand, and it was a launch of a company, so they would own shares in the company. It could have made them $10 million, but at least they were guaranteed $1 million. And he said it felt wrong. Something felt wrong about it. And he didn't move forward. And he said 3 years later, that company got investigated. All the staff members charged, like all the people that were involved in the top of it, got charged, et cetera, et cetera. So he made the right decision. But what I'm saying is, it's easy to make a decision when it's an easy decision. It's not so easy to make a decision when it's a hard one like that. So same scenario here. I would still have removed somebody who was a client if they were really toxic. But if they were just like, oh my God, the weather sucks. Like that to me is not toxic enough to remove them as long as I've got this figured out. So, and that, I just want to give you some context. If you decide to do this, how you would decide to remove somebody. Again, I would go to how important are they in your life? Meaning, like, are they your long lost best friend or whatever? You got to decide based on that. Or are they somebody you only see randomly? If you see them once every month, but you put them on the list, that might not hurt you that much. So what I did from there, once I knew who was who, then I actually went to the other side, which, okay, I removed them. Now, that's not an easy step. Because you got to decide, do they know they're being removed? Meaning, like, how deep do you go into that? Like, hey, I just want to let you know, we got to stop, hanging out. And then you have to explain why. And if you tell them this, they're going to say, what? Yeah, we should. You're a weirdo. In other words, like, they might not understand this. And again, they might not understand why. They probably don't know they're that negative, right? And that's the other thing too. I'm not going to say you can't do this. The other side is you could be honest with them and say, this is why. And maybe that'll be a moment for them of reflection. But I can't say how you're going to handle this. And by the way, I will say some people, no matter what you say, still aren't going to see it. So you got to decide, and I would say based on who the person is, how you know them, all that kind of stuff. But that's where the hard decisions come. Do you tell them this is why? And the easier way really is to reduce time over time. So reduce time, and eventually if they're seeing you less and they make a new friend that they can now bring that to, then eventually you can just weed off that way. Again, I'll leave you to decide how you did it. I went cold turkey. I cut ropes right away. because I just felt like I've been doing this unconsciously and unintentionally for how long? It's time. So I cut ties, and basically I removed, I think at a 14, I'm going by memory on some of this, it was quite a while ago, but I removed something like at a 14, 11 people altogether, like gone from my life. Now, I'm not saying if I saw them in a mall, I wouldn't say hi, and what I did find, which was interesting, is I was the initiator a lot of the times of us getting together. So it was easier to remove them than I thought because I just stopped reaching out. And then, interestingly enough, they didn't reach out, and then it became like, oh, I haven't seen them in 2 or 3 months. It was just easy. And I find that's the case a lot of times. Still to this day, like I'm the initiator to reach out. So if that's the case, it's easier to remove a person that doesn't reach out until you do. So that one was easy. But the point is 11 people out of 14 is a big number. So now I was down to 3 negative and 4 positive, but I was down to 7 people only. But my point is just by doing that, I'd already, if you look at positive, negative, I'd already improved the ratio, right? But then the last part to this piece was then, how do I get surrounded by more of those positive people? And that's when I started changing things in my life, like going to different types of seminars than I would have before that, or joining a book club. Like I found ways to find those people. Really the biggest one was probably going to seminars, like sign up for a Tony Robbins seminar and then go there. And most of the people that go there are going to be probably pretty positive-minded people or into self-help. And that's who I was kind of looking for. So I just figured out where are the people I need to meet and how do I get there? Or a Chamber of Commerce. I would go network at those events. And honestly, I was past the 18 in almost no time of how many total people I was surrounding myself with. So I even increased the number. But the great part is I was conscious, so they were all positive people. So if I would have did the same exercise a year later, which I may have, I can't remember if I did it again because it was most monumental when I first did it. But if I would have did it a year later, it probably would have been like 30 people and maybe down to 3 or 2 negative. But my question is, can you see how something that sounds so simple can have such a big impact on your life? Whenever you literally now know that you are surrounded by the right people, you now know that I call it deposits, like you're depositing positive into your life. And so to me, it's always about depositing more positive, reducing negative. And that's in every aspect of my life. So again, can you guys see? And honestly, I would love, if anybody wants to share any take on this, but I would love to hear your thoughts on this. But can you see how if 80, 90% of your day you're bringing in positive and 10 or 20% you're bringing in negative, you're going to have a better energy than if it's the opposite? Because that's what happened for me. So I flipped this and it changed everything. Because now what happened is I was always conscious about who I was meeting. The last part to this is everything I just said without judgment. Meaning like I wasn't judging if that person was negative. I wasn't judging if I felt they were toxic. That was my belief on it or feeling. But I wasn't judging them. I was just saying I need to protect me. And I remember I interviewed the late Zig Ziglar before his passing. And I asked him about what he was choosing to read and why. And he said he only reads things that are true or that are going to improve his energy. Like basically things that were true, like a biography, or things that were going to help him grow. And he said, I want to make sure I grow until I'm no longer here. And that was like a year or to 6 months before his passing. But what I'm getting at is, he was 80? And he was still doing that. He was still consciously deciding the inputs in his life. Just to finish that off, I would say Jack Canfield. I remember one time I talked to somebody who was standing at the back of a room, and Jack Canfield was in the room. It was like I think it was a Tony Robbins seminar. But anyway, Jack was in the room and he was at this table. And this guy said that he was at one table and Jack was there. Like he was looking at one table. Jack was there. I think he was 68 at the time. And over at this table, there was this 19-year-old. The guy guessed he was 19. And he said, he looked at Jack, who was 69, and he was filling pages of notes. And he looked at this 19-year-old that was going, and he said, how sad is it that Jack at 69 probably doesn't need those notes anymore, but this guy needs Jack's notes more than he'll ever know. So what I'm getting at is Jack would continue to do this, whether it's the right things he's reading, so it's an inventory of your life, but whether he would make sure he's doing all these things all the time. So what I'm saying is be intentional about your life. Don't let it happen by accident. And ask yourself, who is in your life and what are they bringing you for energy? This changed everything for me. And I think you guys could agree, it's a pretty easy exercise. You could literally probably do it in 10 minutes after you leave here with a pen and a piece of paper. So having said that, first of all, that's what I want to share with you around something I believe can change your life if you try to take it on. And it might just be you remove 2 people. It might not be as big as mine, like a big deal like that. But it could be just a difference of you knowing this person is not good for me. So having said that, first of all, thank you so much, you guys, for taking this in, listening to me, and hearing me out. And I'd love to also see if you guys have any questions. So first of all, thank you so much. Thank you, guys. So any questions around this or any thoughts, even if you want to share your thought around this?
Could you do a quick recap since I was reading the review?
The short version is, made a list of people in my life, figured out if they were adding positive energy, negative energy, added it up to figure out if I was more positive than negative, what was coming into my life, figured out what it was, decided how I could reduce and remove negative people, and then how I could add more positive people. And basically what happened, just the backstory is I said that I heard this thing one time, the only difference between the you and today and the you of 5 years' time will be the people that you meet and the books that you read. And I knew I was reading the right books. So then it came down to the people that I meet. By the way, I'll give you the other one. If you want to know if you're reading the right books, what I always recommend is A, go to the people who you admire, find out what they're reading and read that. Or B, go to the bestseller list and see what book's been on there for 30 years. If a book has been on for 30 years, or if somebody says Napoleon Hill's Think and Grow Rich sold 100 million copies, I just want to let you know that's not an accident. You don't keep selling to 100 million if it's a bad book. You can argue with me and say, I don't like that book, or I don't like what it stands for, whatever. That's one thing. But you can't say that the book had changed lives if it sold 100 million copies. Likewise with The Alchemist, which is 300 million copies. Celestine Prophecy, 40 million copies. So what I'm saying is find out what the people you admire are reading and dive into that. And the other side is find out what people read based on popularity and dive into that. Now, when I say this, I'm talking nonfiction, personal development, that type of thing. But the other thing I want to add, since yesterday I told you guys I'd share about this. So I told you guys I would share PMA. Remember I said yesterday E + R = O? So here's the second one I carry around with me. And I got this chip made. Again, PMA stands for Positive Mental Attitude. And so there's a book called Success Through a Positive Mental Attitude. It's interesting, I just mentioned in reference to Napoleon Hill. He co-wrote that book with W. Clement Stone. And it's a game-changing book. What's fascinating to me, just like Think and Grow Rich, how many people have read Think and Grow Rich? So Think and Grow Rich, what's interesting is the secret of Think and Grow Rich isn't revealed until almost the end of the book. Like he says, you'll find the secret as you read the pages. Well, they did the same with this book. And it's funny to me that the book is called Success Through a Positive Mental Attitude. And it was like 3 chapters in, they say, we'll reveal what PMA stands for. And I'm reading a book that on the cover spells out what it's for. And I didn't clue in, and I asked 4 or 5 other friends, like, I never did either. Like, so they told you the name, but then didn't tell you. Which Think and Grow Rich, the secret is what you think about, you bring about. But the point is, it was right in the title and we didn't get it. So PMA, basically what they say is we always carry around an invisible talisman. I decided to make it a visible poker chip that says PMA on one side, NMA on the other, which is negative mental attitude. I decided, why am I going to print a poker chip and have negative with me? So I just made it positive on both sides. But it always reminds me that just like E + R = O, every day I get to choose how I show up. And it sounds maybe cheesy, and energy to some people sounds cheesy, but literally taking on the day with a positive mental attitude, people always say, you're so lucky. And I always say, if you only knew how much work goes into being lucky. But honestly, I don't believe in luck in the sense that, like, I get it, and this is a random thing, but Heidi can affirm this. Most times I get a George Costanza parking spot. I usually get a good parking spot. Like today I came in the Uber and I said to Heidi, yeah, I'll come a little bit later. My Uber was 28 minutes. And yesterday the same distance was an hour. I went to park in, I told you about this actually, April. I went to park at the Secret Knock, and there was a space there, and they had 2 cones in front of it. The only space you couldn't park in, these 2 cones. And I pull up and I'm like, this is my 3rd day. It's the only day I didn't get a good parking spot. And the lady comes running out of nowhere, a parking ninja. She comes running out of nowhere and she goes like this, and she grabs the 2 cones and she goes, puts them aside. And I looked for her after that, disappeared. Parking ninja. And then before she disappeared, she went, she didn't do it like that. She probably didn't. I Hollywoodized it. She went like this or something, or went like that. And it said compact cars, but I mean, I don't think you would leave that up just to keep out a truck. Like, in other words, I don't know the reason that was there. No other one had it. And she goes like that, and it was the closest spot to the end of the parking lot. So she's like, here's the best spot, and you're welcome. Puff, ninja, gone. What I'm saying is that I showed up and got that, and there'll be people that are bitching, great, parking's gonna suck, wait till I get there, whatever. And I guarantee you, most of those people get horrible parking spots or drive around for an hour. And I actually, remember I said to you, I was saying when I went for the interview, that was the third day. The second one is what I just told you about. The third day was I was looking and the parking spot was gone. I was like, okay, well, let's go park in the street. I went to park in the street and the meter said the app, not credit card, the app is not available in your region because I'm from Canada. It wouldn't let me download the app. This is the city of San Diego. So I can't park in the city of San Diego because it won't let me download the app, which I find funny because they have a lot of tourists there. Having said that, so I drove around one more time and somebody goes like this and pulled out and they start to pull it and they go, like, do you want this spot? I'm like, oh, sure. I pull in and I'm like, where's the meter to pay? And the guy pulls in beside me. He goes, oh, it's free here all day. He said, that's why there's only 8 spots, but it's free. You don't have to pay here. So the third day, it was free. Again, you can say, because people say you're lucky, but what I can tell you is, guess what? I was very unlucky before that. In other words, when I was using the negative mental attitude, I didn't get those spots, and I was the guy who got the horrible spots. So you can choose whether it is. My choice is, if that's all I have to do to lead a good life and have a good day, I'm all in. So whether you choose to carry one of these around or not, you can. But I will actually, if you want them, I'll give you guys each one so you can carry this around until you make your own. So having said that, thank you guys so much. You're all awesome.